Now, something that has been known to happen with the OEM Mazda MX-5 Miata throttle body is the butterfly, or its mounting shaft, fails, explodes into a million pieces, runs itself through your motor, causing catastrophic failure. There are aftermarket options available, such as the Skunk2 throttle body. However, just recently, China has come up with a Skunk2 kind of copy. So I thought it'd be interesting to grab one, have a look at what is involved, how well it's built, and I might put it on this car. Maybe. Could be a bad idea. Is it worse than this though? Anyway, let's open this thing up and have a look. Righto, so before we go and open up the Chinese throttle body, let's have a quick squiz at the OEM one, and this is off an NB VVT motor. And I think actually this is from my supercharged car, which is now running an aftermarket throttle body altered on the supercharger. Anyway, so I guess the guts of this, you've got obviously your throttle body butterfly, you've got two cooling lines which aren't that significant, your idle speed control valve, which has a little air bypass to allow the car to sort of maintain its idle. You've got your throttle position sensor, obviously on the NBs, these are all continuously or proper variable TPSs. Your double spring, the sort of bleed screw, which, or the throttle body stop screw, which I don't think I've ever adjusted, and the sort of the bleed screw, which again I don't think I've ever adjusted on the later cars. So that's sort of OEM. It's pretty grimy, but it is what it is. A few things to note. Through the top here we have studs that come off the intake manifold and then nuts that go here, whereas through the bottom there's two different sized or two different length bolts. That's a thing of note. We'll come back to that when I start opening up the new thing. So set that aside. First off, the packaging is pretty crap. It's already falling apart, and inside we've got a bag of gaskets, some sort of adapter, and some screws, and the throttle body itself, which wasn't really supported in any way. That box is completely empty, and this thing was just left to roll around in there, which made for, I guess, causing a bit of damage to the box. The throttle body itself is probably pretty hardy, and you wouldn't expect any damage to this. First thing I noticed was the single spring, and now this is kind of a significant, or something I consider significant. So the OEM spring for the throttle body is twin round or twin twisted or whatever you want to call it, which means you've kind of got a backup. If any point was to fail here, you've actually got sort of a twin wind of coils, and so if any point does fail, you still have a spring. With this one, however, it's a single wind, which means if it fails, your throttle body is going to get stuck, probably open. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing, of course, was machining. Now, if we have a look, I wouldn't call it well done, particularly when you can consider some of the corners where there's still a lot of burrs and sharp edges and things, and the machining surfaces are pretty bad. I presume that means they've used poor quality tooling, or perhaps blunt tools. I mean, it's not disastrous, and it is still a piece of machined aluminium or aluminum, but it's not too bad though. The other thing, of course, with the throttle body is how is the condition of the actual throttle bore. And look, I don't think it's too bad. It looks fairly smooth. There's sort of nothing unusual. There are some, if I run my finger up and down, I can feel some sort of lumps and but there's no sharp scoring, and it's just sort of slight gradual lumps. So yeah, I guess it's fairly reasonable condition, fairly reasonable quality. Of course, the diameter is slightly larger than OEM as well, so that's a thing to note. You can't really, or if you're going to swap these over, you would possibly need to change the intake piping you're running. It's only slightly larger, but it is larger. The OEM throttle plate is mounted with screws, and then they are riveted in place from the other side. This is Phillips head screws, no rivets on the back, so A well-known thing is to remove the screws, put some Loctite on them and tighten them down really nice and solid. If I try and undo these, they're actually very loose. I could get that done without any trouble at all. Shout out to the awesome Vessel screwdriver, by the way. These things are mad. Anyway, so yeah, that's a point of note. The throttle plate, or the shaft, interestingly, it has flats. The OEM one is completely round, and I noticed that as it goes into the bearing or the ends of the throttle body, it's still flat, it's not rounded, so I don't know if that would allow for movement. I'm assuming once it gets to actual bearing, it's fully round, so perhaps it's not a problem. And you would hope that these are all properly well sealed, because air leaks could potentially go through here, which wouldn't be a good thing. The actual throttle cam, or whatever this thing's called, is black, whether it be anodized or whatever it is. It's definitely some sort of metal, I presume aluminium again. Seems to lock closed okay. The spring force is fairly strong. If I try and, it feels stronger than the OEM one. Perhaps not as consistent though. When it starts to get towards the fully closed point, it kind of feels like it springs off a little bit. So I have heard people online suggest you take this, you unbolt this cam, take it off, drill a slightly tighter hole and reinstall this with slightly stronger spring. It will of course mean your pedal feels stronger, or the throttle pedal will feel heavier, but I guess not having your throttle sort of stuck slightly open is a good thing. This bleed screw up the top looks kind of chintzy. If I try and adjust it, it doesn't feel very nice with the screwdriver, and it kind of has a weird, it's an overly large slot, which means your flathead screwdriver sort of shifts around a lot like this. But if we undo it, yeah, it doesn't feel nice. I think I'm going to leave it there. I don't rather want to pull that out too far. The back side, the mating surface, fairly clean. There's a small scratch there, but I don't think I'd have any problems with that sort of mating and sitting flush to the intake manifold. Now, interestingly, the bottom has been had the holes provisioned for the idle speed control valve from the OEM throttle body, which is a good thing. These things are a bit of a pain to get out, by the way. You'll need like a socket or impact driver or something to get these out. They're pretty tight. So I've already hit mine up, and they should come off. Yes, they do. And oh, it's stuck on good. Someone's played with this before, because it looks like it's been siliconed on there. There we go. So you can see how the two holes line up on the OEM throttle body. They obviously won't line up here. And so they've supplied this sort of adapter plate, which is kind of complicates the kit, if you ask me. I don't know why they needed to do all this. They should have just, I don't know, tried to design it more like the OEM one. So now the interesting thing with the way the IAC valve mounts onto this throttle body is via this adapter plate, and it's a little convoluted with how it has to mount. Ends up protruding past where the flange for the mount goes, for the intake goes. So the tricky thing is, of course, trying to work out where the gasket goes. So obviously like that, and then you've got to flip it over upside down, put it in place, and you need to install the single bolt into the hole here, and that has to sit below the surface of here so that this mounts over the top of it. The silly thing is this bolt is way too long, and that's as far as I can tighten it, so it needs to be cut down shorter, or you need to find yourself a shorter bolt. Once that is mounted flush, you can install your second gasket, and then this can screw down with the OEM bolts. And then the next thing that I found interesting was they supply some new hardware to mount the throttle body to the intake manifold. Now, I would much prefer, if it were my car, to use the OEM stuff, but that would mean they'd need to machine the heights to match the OEM one, which are all different heights, which is kind of a little odd. On this one, they've machined them all the same level, supplied new bolts. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the top uses studs in the manifold, and you put nuts on. So you would need to remove those studs from the manifold before you install your new throttle body. Perhaps it's different on the other cars, but I know that's definitely how it mounts on the NB VVT motor that we got here in Australia. The actual bearing on the end here, it looks respectable. Look, I'm not a bearing professional. It doesn't seem too bad. The actual throttle body, it's pretty. The actual plate seems pretty sturdy. As I mentioned, you want to Loctite these screw holes or these mounting screws. The actual diameter of the throttle body shaft is slightly larger than the OEM one, but not hugely. And for those of you playing at home who know about Skunk2, you'll know that this is a very similar item to that, although it isn't exactly the same. This is sort of like a copy of the Skunk2 one. This shaft, for example, is slightly smaller on this throttle body. The finish isn't as good as the Skunk2 one, and some of the machining locations are slightly different. But that said, a lot of it is very similar. For example, these plates and things that they supply are all much the same as a Skunk2 throttle body. The other interesting thing to note is I have seen these online, or have heard people on like Miata Turbo, for example, saying they got these in black or a black finish. So I don't know if it's an anodized finish. I assume that's kind of just luck of the draw and you get what you're given, but something to note. Overall, I can't say it's that bad. I do probably have a few things I'd fix or change if it was going on my car. For example, the screws here, I'd probably triple check the tightness of some of your adjusters, and I might do something about this spring. I don't know if I could reuse the OEM one, or I don't know. I'm just a little sketchy, a little concerned about the single throttle body spring. Other than that, I think I'll gamble trying it on the race car at some point. Not in a rush to put it on. For now, it'll probably sit in the box, but I think it's worth giving it a go. Look, the diameter is larger. It's going to improve performance, particularly on boosted cars that are flowing more air. This is bigger than this. This is going to help. Whether it'll last, that's the worry. Whether it blows an engine because it falls apart, that's also a worry. But so are these are known to do that as well anyway. This shaft fails, they blow to bits, and they cause an engine failure. As you can see, this has come out of a pretty grimy engine anyway. Now I should also mention the gaskets that come with the thing. They don't look that delicious. A little bit sort of cardboardy, which, I mean, gaskets often are just cardboard, but this is Chinese cardboard, and when they come bent like that, I just don't know if I can trust it. I'd probably use the smaller ones for the idle speed valve, but I might reuse the OEM one. The OEM one generally you can reuse over and over quite a few times, so you'd probably skip on that one, just use these two. Anyway folks, that's it for the review and breakdown on the Chinese 64mm throttle body Skunk2 copy. I don't know exactly which cars these fit. I know it definitely fits the NBs. I'm not sure what NAs it may or may not fit. Do your own homework on that one. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time.